Snow. Yay. No. That's not a yay thing. It's horrible, terrible, awful. Awful, double awful. Triple awful. I have a walking stick. Don't know if that'll work. It'll probably just end up being a impale me stick. We'll see. We'll see how far I get. What is there to say? Okay, yeah, consciousness. Yeah, I think I'll do a little more on it. Just because, it's an interesting subject. I mean, it is the substance of our existence, right? It's this internal experience we have. And some people tend to be talking as if this is a substance, floating around the universe, this conscious thing. And it just seems kind of silly. And I think we know it's completely dependent on brains and how brains created. And that's the extent of it. It's a neurological, it's like a muscle. You can almost argue that the first neuron was something like a muscle. One end, the fiber stretches, and the fiber contracts, and so it's like a reflexive piece of tissue. And so instead of contracting, neurons chemically react, by passing an electrical signal. Whoa. And so that would be the fundamental mechanical difference is just a difference in kind, or however you want to put that. It's not a meaningful difference. Can't really find my path here. Video recording, yeah. There's some animal that's confusing me by walking in directions I don't walk. So it's just you could look at it as just like theoretically, if any kind of reflexive substance, a substance that changed its property based on a circumstance, were piled on top of each other and reacted to different things, they could become what we call a brain. A reactive device. So that's the other thing. People talk like this synthetic intelligence and all this kind of thing. And yeah, the tricky part is the synthetic sense, the feeling thing, especially the qualitative feeling, the feeling of, irritation is kind of a good word for it, maybe. The irritating feelings, the not comforting, versus the comforting. So it's like the irritation is created, the angst, and then there's a relieving of that, a subsiding of that irritation, and it's fundamentally the mechanism. So you could call the irritation almost the contraction, and call the comfort going back to the relaxation, back to the normal state of quiet, as a way of metaphoring it right to its core. That's all that's really happening, even mechanically. It's happening to us perceptually, but it's also in the mechanism, in the mechanics. There's a tensioning, a tightening, and a relaxing of the physical properties of the basic fundament, the basic quanta neurological mechanism. The basic neuron is mimicking the byproduct phenomenon of our perception in terms of these qualitative states. So you can see a lot of parallels if you look for them in even magnetism, attraction and repulsion, and we see a similar mechanism in how we are, through these neurological tensioning and detensioning, tightening and loosening of our screws, how we're made to be attracted to doing something because, we'll earn a, candy bar, or peanut, or whatever we earn for it, and that we are acting and reacting in the environment based on these pulling and pushing away. So pulling toward and pushing away forces that we're balancing in our experience overall. So even in very complex acts, where this is kind of a complex thing I'm doing, where I have this, I have to do these chores, blah blah blah, it earns my keep, so to speak, but I'll only do so much for it. I won't get killed for it. I might get cold feet for it. I might fall down for it. But only go so far. Hopefully, I won't impale myself for it, or in some other way, end up on the wrong side of the relaxation, comfort versus discomfort scale. And I'll end up getting more comfort out of the deal than I will create tension and discomfort. And that's sort of how we live our lives, measuring experiences and activities for their utility in accomplishing our task. Maybe I should go across the ice upstream. We'll see. This ice might not be strong enough. But this one's... I'm not going to like this. I just know I'm not. I know I'm not. Look at that, there's ice on there. Oh, dog prints. The dog was gutsy enough to do it. This doesn't look good, does it? Pretty solid though. So I mean, if I don't fall down, I could just theoretically skate across. Yeah, that part I don't like much. So what do you think? Do you think I should go for it? Yeah, Gary, go for it, Gary! I don't know. It doesn't appeal to me. Doesn't really appeal to me. Yeah, that rock there isn't too good, right? See that one there? That one does not look too good. Yeah. I mean, the other one's got snow on it, so you got some chance. I don't know, Davey. I don't want to go swimming, that's for sure. I know that much. I do not want to go in the water. That I don't want to do. Oh, that is solid. I think I can do it. See if well. Now, you can poke through it. It's kind of cruddy ice. It's like slush underneath kind of ice. It's only like an inch thick, really. Hard ice. It looks kind of funky over there, where the current is. I don't know. It's really worth it. Yeah, I mean, how the hell am I going to step on that? Oh, I'm not going to have to step on it, right? Yeah, that's right, I don't have to. Oh, man. This is probably not clever at all. I should just go, turn around, go home, instead of being an asshole. Yeah, it's really cracking behind me. Which way should I go? See? But this is what brains do. They'll sit here and say, they'll measure their circumstance, say, what do I do with this circumstance? Is there any hope in this circumstance? Is there a good outcome? Oh, that's really slippery. I could throw some shit on here. make life maybe possible. See, there's some dog made it. Maybe a fucking dog can do it. I should be more clever than a dog. There's a footing. Nice step there. Okay, it's not perfect, but it should keep me from slipping. Yeah. Yeah, I made it. Jump. Okay, stick in here. There, I made it. Alright, enough of that crap. I really don't want to make it. I should have just turned around. See, but that's constantly through life. This is what we do. We measure our circumstance, say which way should I go? Should I grab that little piece of ass or should I move along? Yeah. Don't play with fire. Or should you play with the fire? And yeah, and it's all for what? Just to create this machine of satisfaction. So that's the one thing I'm missing from the last two videos I did with the pictures and stuff. Is I don't think I really illustrated the the origins were chemistry, and we still have that chemical engine inside of us. And it's tied to these hormones and emotions that create that have huge dispositional changes. Fundamentally changes the orientation of the software. It's like it thickens the atmosphere or it thins the atmosphere that the processing takes place in and changes the conclusions and outcomes. And that's still a very big fundamental part of what's going on in here. And the key moment, really, it isn't so much the mental processing that's difficult to comprehend. You can sort of understand the recording device, the idea of recording memories, the idea of a shorthand to do that in, compression algorithms, that sort of makes sense. So lots of this can make sense. The tricky one is this feeling thing, the actual qualitative sense of it. And this, whether it's giving you a sense of relief, whether it's tightening a screw or loosening the screw, in the torture chair, your consciousness is in a sense. And, we're just living hoping for that, that we're going to be, more comfortable than uncomfortable. But the idea of comfort, the idea of a sensation is so critical. So I've used words like the first ouch, to describe, the nature of it. That's how it all began, with this idea of consciousness. That's about an ouch. Ice under here. Hey, pup. Hey, pup. Hey. Just sitting there looking at me. I don't know why. Must be the jacket. Yeah, somebody else's. Well, unless it's mine now. They're throwaway. Yeah. I recycle. Everything I own has been recycled. Anyway, this is going to be a long walk. So the first ouch. So that, the first, repulsive sensation, the first tension was probably how it all started. And then by creating that tension, you could create the sensation of relief. Yeah. So anyway, where do I go from there? yeah, I don't know. So yeah, I wanted to get to the part where, this idea, I think, too, is another useful metaphor. This idea of understanding your feelings, your emotions, this ability to sense something as comfortable or uncomfortable causing is like the sixth sense. It's like another sense projected by your own brain. So in like an ear or an eye or your nose that is sensing the outside world, this internal sense is just creating the illusion of a world of quality, a world of value to your welfare, to your physical well-being, to your now psychological well-being. It essentially creates a psychological well-being, and by doing that finds a way of incorporating defense of the physical well-being by making it part of the psychological well-being. So this is where I've talked before about what's really happening here, is that this internal external world is being processed by my brain as an initial raw data, and it's converting it into something I'm going to react to physically, emotionally. It creates a qualitative impression. So if there's a problem out there and my brain recognizes it, it makes it a problem in here. If it sees a Tyrannosaurus come flopping across the path, I'm going to be, in a moment exhilarated, and the very next moment I'm going to be, pissing my pants, saying, well, how the fuck do I get out of here? I don't want to get my feet wet going that way. Maybe I could just hide. But I'm going to react. So the problem out there, that wasn't a problem, because it's that way over there. My brain can make it a problem now. It can make it an immediate problem for me now. Not later, not whenever, but now. And that's pretty much the function of consciousness, is to take problems, that are in the future in a way, threats to my welfare interest, my welfare interest genetically speaking, which means my familiar code familiar to my own, and creates this ability to see future threats and make them current problems. And that's a big part of what's happening in consciousness, is opportunity likewise. So threats and opportunity are gleaned out of the future, are recognized to exist in that future out there. My brain recognizes it, and it makes it nowish. It makes me do something now to invest in that future. Me getting where I'm going. The goal is there. My brain can see it, and it compels me, for the body now, to need that future, to go towards that future, to act in the interest of that future. And that's a big part of the function of consciousness. So the last question is pretty much just the question I've gone over before, and I've had different answers. I have to admit, my thinking on the subject has changed over the years. I used to think a synthetic brain with consciousness would be impossible. Why? Shouldn't be. It's a material brain. Should be able to create a material duplicate correlate mechanisms. They don't have to be identical. They just have to simulate a similar process. But that's the trick, is the correlating them. It's very hard to make a computer to create a piece of hardware that creates sensation. I'm recording. Yeah, looks like it. Alright, glove deal again. I gotta think of a better plan, I think. Especially when I gotta carry anything. Alright, where were we? Yeah, pissed me off. Batteries, I guess. Went out. I was getting right to the good part of something, I think. See if I can reconstruct where I was. Feelings. No, I don't think it was just that. Something to do with recognizing yeah, what? Value? No, I did that part, I think. So it is a value engine, part of our brain. It's just a value engine. Yeah, that's it. The computer thing, synthetic. What would a synthetic consciousness be like? And what it has to create is value designation through some sort of overt, aggressive, nasty, just going across the water here. Don't like it, but hopefully the feet will survive it. Yeah, where was I? Yeah, computer synthetic. So yeah, you'd have to create some sort of synthetic mechanism that establishes a core of value, which is, this idea of attraction, repulsion, the idea of pain, pleasure, the idea of obnoxious, pleasant, the idea of, tense, relaxed, the idea of aggravated and comfortable, agitation, comfortable, whatever, something like that. So, without that mechanism to establish a value system, there's nothing for it to, it can't function as a learning device, because it doesn't have any way of establishing value. And so fundamentally our values are driven first by our own personal genetic code and our own personal bodily interest, and we can see that pretty fundamentally in the fact that we're hungry and we're, generally speaking, horny, and we have this ambition to succeed, which is likely to get us the chicks and all that kind of crap. Obviously, vice versa for the women's. We want the best male, to father the children and such. So we have these psychological incentives and mechanisms built into that obvious interest. And then we have these higher interests that are familial and tribal, and might even say racial, that motivate people in some higher order of perception of value, not quite as visceral, not quite as mechanical, but in most social organisms, those hierarchies are important. Being praised by the group is an important mechanism to your comfort and satisfaction, your pride, your capacity to, like I say, even some animals will even metamorph, to physically change based on how well they perceive themselves through their maturation. So if they perceive themselves as winners, they'll become alpha physically. And if they perceive themselves as losers, they will beta. That might be why the mechanism of depression might even exist. It might have something to do with the depression of the system, the regression of the tools of health and welfare in terms of being a fighter and a maintainer of status. And so it essentially might also it might minimize the expense of combat, and that instead of having to beat somebody up every day, you just beat them once, they get depressed, and then they stay away. Something like that. I mean, I'm laughing about something that's not funny, but that's probably part of the reason for the existence of the mechanism, is that it, in this backward way, is somehow helpful to the overall, or species, the overall genetic code, because we don't create excessive carnage. I mean, there has to be a point where you just want to have enough combat to glean out the clunkers from the winners. You don't want to have any more than what's necessary, because in some of that combat you will degrade or break a winner. You'll take something that was good, it'll slip on a banana peel or something, break its neck, and so you ruined a good hunk of genetics because you forced it to get into an arena of combat that isn't always perfect in deciding winners and losers. And so anyway, I got into a whole bit of evolutionary psychology mimbo jumbo, which isn't really the subject, but it's all related, so I think you can survive the addition. Here's that little nice bit of scenery here. I don't know if it's too good today. What a day. It really isn't that bad. I just, every day I say what a day, because I'm just like, oh, I'm still here, still fighting. Oh. But yeah, everything froze up. Cold, cold, cold. Really cold. Anyway, got my Montana jacket on now. It's like a Montana jacket. Anyway, I need a hat, a Montana hat. But I wouldn't wear it too often because I don't like Montana. Yeah, I don't like the cold. I'd like to be in the Dairy Queen or something. In Montana. Not in Montana, but maybe in an ice cream truck driving through Montana. Might be nice. Potato chip truck. Anyway, get back to work here. So anyway, synthetic intelligence, going back to that again. So yeah, what you really need is a value element. So you need to establish through some sort of hardware mechanism, something rock solid, some sort of prime directive, some sort of incentives, and not just incentives, wrong word, some sort of, not ambition, not quite the right word. I've used it in other videos, and I can't remember it. But it's that idea of an initiative thing, that idea of the agenda. That's it. You need an agenda engine. And so what makes our consciousness possible, the reason why we have one that's so alive, so conscious, is that it creates a powerful agenda engine. It's highly motivational. in terms of the unyieldingness, the responses required. I mean, when somebody's taking this stick and heading for your butt, you're gonna move aggressively. The closer it gets, there's going to be an equal and proportional reaction kind of thing in terms of the agenda created inside of you to prevent what it appears like is going to happen. And creating a synthetic agenda engine, that's the tricky part. How do you do that in software alone? How do you just say it to a computer like, okay, it's really important now, pay attention, okay, it really matters, when it can't be hurt, when it's incapable of being harmed? How can the computer take the agenda seriously, unless it's got some kind of stake in the outcome? And so that's the real game. It's measuring that agenda crap, creating that agenda crap. All right, I gotta prepare here. Don't want to have this around my killed. I want to be able to throw it if necessary. All right, here we go. Ice again. Wow, this is slippery. Wow, this is really slippery. Okay. Whoa. Yeah, this is really slippery. Okay, I made it. I think I'm okay. I think I got it. I think I'm okay. Oh, this is the one I gotta worry about. Alright, got a little hole there. Slide over here. Don't break, baby. Don't break. Don't break, baby. Don't break. Okay, didn't break. Whew. Okay. Moving right along. Made it. I am the man, kind of. Sort of. Yeah. Pretty good. Well, it's not really. Yeah, it's not that impressive. Alright, never mind. Alright, so where was I? Switching hands, I believe. Switch hands. Still recording? Yeah. Alright, so synthetic, that's it. Synthetic. So yeah, it's the agenda engine. Agenda engine. See, I mean, everybody should. Sorry, I really do have to go through all my 9,643 videos and pull out all these good little phrases. Because agenda engine, that's a really good phrase. Because that really is what distinguishes us from a computer, is the agenda engine. Yep. We have a visceral, intense agenda engine. So, but I do think, theoretically, you could establish some sort of prime directives inside of a computer, and it's just the tricky part, I guess, would be establishing the associations between events and that prime directive, and getting the idea of the negativeness and positiveness, reward and punishment. Really hard to punish without the ability to feel. But I would suppose it could be synthesized in some manner or other, that the software could have built into it an unwritable, unchangeable, basic recognition of what is wrong, and once you establish those wrongs for it, that it can't alter them, can't just fudge with them. But that would be the difference, is that you'd have to establish them as higher order mandates for them to have any clarity I mean, if you just said the only thing that matters is self-interest, that wouldn't be enough. These our emotions are more complicated than that. And they have built into them conditioning. And so that's another part. You know, you'd have to have a computer that was conditioned before it actually went online. You'd have to raise it to, you know, with rewards and punishments, so it could do the same kind of associational learning that we do, for it to understand the nuance and complexity of the values we acquire, you know, both personal, subjective, and cultural subjective. An awful lot of what we are is subjective reaction, personal taste and sensibility, and a computer would likewise probably have to acquire some sort of personality of sorts, a way of expressing its understanding of good and bad, right, wrong, positive, negative, in this nuanced and complex world that it would be in. Oh yeah, it's probably enough. Alright, it is kind of lovely here, sort of, kind of. Yeah, so I think we'll call it a day. Sorry about the sniffling. I can't get rid of this, whatever this infection thing in my head is. It won't go away. Need something.